Hey everyone, it's Mallory here with All About Cats, and in this week's video I'm going to be going over my top 7 recommendations for the best dry food of 2022. Over the last several years, I've done a lot of cat food reviews. So on the All About Cats site, there are over 100 cat food brand reviews, and I've personally tested out dozens of brands. Over the last year, we've also sent off over 20 different recipes to a lab, and at that laboratory, they did a number of tests on each of these recipes, including a microbiological test, a nutrient analysis, and testing for heavy metals. And so based on all of that research and testing, I wanted to bring you an updated list for 2022, sharing the recipes and brands that I think are going to be the best this year. There will be video navigation so you can jump to reviews of specific brands, and I'll be segmenting each of these reviews based on specific needs. So you can jump to my pick for the best food for weight loss, for example, or the best food if you're on a budget. Hopefully that'll help you to kind of pick through the video and get to exactly what you need. So with that said, let's jump on into my top 7 recommendations. If you've watched our channel before, you'll know that generally we're recommending a low carbohydrate diet, maybe 10% carbohydrates on a dry matter basis or less. And generally you can't really find that in a dry food. So Dr. Elsey's Clean Protein does something different from the majority of dry food brands in keeping that carbohydrate content quite low. In the analysis I got from the lab, we found that the food was 70% protein, 19% fat, and just 3% carbohydrates, which is practically unheard of in dry cat food. They accomplished this by using gelatin as a binder instead of using any kind of starch, and this manages to keep the carbohydrate content really low. That's going to make it a good choice even for cats who have diabetes. And while, of course, no dry food is going to deliver the moisture your cat needs, this is certainly a more species-appropriate and meat-rich choice than the vast majority of dry foods on the market. The food is also intended to have highly digestible protein sources. So this particular recipe features chicken as its first ingredient and contains some dried egg product. And then it also contains pork protein isolate, which is supposed to be a highly digestible source of protein. In addition to this chicken recipe, you can get it in turkey, salmon, and rabbit recipes, but I've noticed that all of them contain multiple proteins, so they're probably not going to be the best choice if your cat has any food sensitivities to the ingredients included. At $8.15 per pound, this food is pretty expensive, and the price has gone up over the last year or so. So if you're looking for something a bit cheaper, it's probably not going to be the best choice. And in that case, I would recommend my budget recommendation, which is Kirkland Signature's Maintenance Cat chicken and rice cat food. So while this food isn't perfect, and there are 2 kind of big issues with it, one is that it's high in carbohydrates, and the other is that it seems to be manufactured by Deboned, which is a huge cat food manufacturer, one of the biggest companies in this industry, and which has been involved in a number of recalls in the past. Aside from these 2 issues, the food is offering several things that you're not generally finding in a budget-friendly food. One of them is that it includes clearly named proteins, so we're seeing chicken at the beginning of that ingredient list, as well as chicken meal. We're not seeing generic animal byproducts or meat byproducts, these ingredients that don't really tell us what's in the food. And then we're also seeing some nice added ingredients like probiotics that we're not typically seeing in budget tier cat foods. If you live near a Costco store and you have a membership, it's going to be pretty accessible. So as for nutrient composition, our test found that it was 41% protein, 16% fat, and 43% carbohydrates on a dry matter basis. Again, that's quite high in carbohydrates, so that's not going to be ideal. But again, considering the types of ingredients that they're using, it seems like it is a pretty good choice compared to other budget-tier foods. And again, affordability is really this food's main selling point, so I found it on the Kirkland website for $1.48 a pound, but the price is going to be significantly lower if you can find it in a local Costco wholesale. Kind of on the opposite end of the price spectrum is my top recommendation if you're looking for an air-dried food, which is Ziwi's Mackerel and Lamb air-dried food. This is a New Zealand made brand, and their foods are known for really low carbohydrate content, high inclusions of meat ingredients. Overall, they're just offering way more species-appropriate nutrition compared to a typical dry food. You can see on the ingredient list that the food contains mackerel, lamb tripe, and lamb liver. So it's offering a variety of organs that we seldom see in cat food outside of byproducts. And so this is offering a really rich variety of species-appropriate, meat-sourced nutrition. Overall, the lab test results looked good. Because it contains some fish, I noticed that some of those heavy metals were coming up a little bit higher. But again, this seems to be kind of typical for a fish-based food. And then the nutrient distribution was looking pretty good as well. So according to this test, the food was 50% protein, 38% fat, and just 2% carbohydrates on a dry matter basis. My cats didn't really like this particular recipe. They preferred the chicken recipe from Ziwi, and a number of other varieties are available from this line, and all of them offer kind of similar nutrition. This food is a bit more expensive than the others on this list at about $22.80 per pound. Quite expensive, but you will be feeding your cat a bit less of it. Not enough, though, to make it no longer an expensive option. It's quite a pricey dry cat food, so you'll have to decide if that's going to be worth the investment for you. If you're trying to help your cat lose weight, you might like Tiki Cat's Born Carnivore chicken and egg recipe. Like a lot of Tiki Cat's wet recipes, this food is a little bit lower in fat and a little bit lower in calories compared to comparable products, and it tends to be a relatively good option if you're trying to help your cat to lose weight. Now, I really wouldn't recommend dry food in general for weight loss. Wet food tends to be a lot more satisfying. It tends to work a lot better for weight loss, but if you do want to use a dry food, careful portions of this recipe could be a good option. There are a couple of recipes in the Born Carnivore line. This particular one contains deboned chicken and chicken meal as its primary ingredients. Cats tend to like this recipe. It tends to be pretty appetizing, and in my test from the lab, everything looked okay, and the nutrient distribution came out at 52% protein, 18% fat, and 18% carbohydrates on a dry matter basis. So overall, this nutrient distribution is looking pretty good, definitely on the lower fat side, but also on the lower carb side, which is pretty nice. At $4.49 a pound, this food is kind of expensive, but I would say it's kind of moderately priced for this kind of so-called natural premium marketplace. My next recommendation is going to be my favorite ethically sourced recipe. There are some brands that are taking extra steps to make food that is held to a slightly higher standard than the competition, and one of those brands is Open Farm. So this is a relatively new Canadian brand, and they offer a relatively small selection of dry foods and a number of recipes, all of which are held to pretty stringent standards when it comes to sourcing. So all of their suppliers are held to a certain set of standards according to a number of different organizations. This particular recipe contains wild Pacific salmon, ocean whitefish meal, herring meal, and then garbanzos as its first several ingredients. And their other recipes tend to follow kind of a similar recipe blueprint. According to our lab test, everything generally checked out, and the nutrient analysis showed that it was 44% protein, about 16% fat, and 29% carbohydrates on a dry matter basis. If for whatever reason you're comfortable with a higher carbohydrate food and you're prioritizing that ethical sourcing, then this recipe from Open Farm could be a good option. At $6.87 per pound, this food is a bit more expensive than a lot of the competition. My next recommendation is going to be for those of you who have kittens. Our last year's recommendation is no longer available, so I had to find a new one, and I like this one a lot better. So it is Instinct by Nature's Varieties original grain-free recipe with real chicken for kittens. And what I like about this recipe is that it's relatively low in carbohydrates. Of course, it's formulated to meet your kitten's dietary needs, and it seems to be kind of a meat-based recipe. The recipe contains chicken, turkey meal, Manhattan fish meal, and then peas as its first several ingredients, and everything looked good from the lab. Converting those macronutrient values to a dry matter basis, we're seeing that the food is 48% protein, 24% fat, and 16% carbohydrates. And overall, yeah, that's not perfect, but it's pretty good for a dry cat food. So if you are looking for a dry food for your kitten, this could be a good option. The food is currently priced at about $5.56 per pound on Chewy, so a little bit more expensive than some of the other foods listed here, but I certainly think that it's, again, one of the best kitten foods on the market. Again, dry cat food is really not nutritionally ideal. Generally, it's higher in carbohydrates, as we've seen, is inherently low in moisture, which can lead to problems with urinary tract health. There are a number of reasons why you would want to avoid a dry cat food. Given that dry cat food is probably the most popular type of food here in the United States, and that so many of us have cats who are kind of kibble addicts, a big question I see in the comments is, how do I get my cat to transition from dry to wet food? And one solution to consider is to start transitioning your cat from dry food to a freeze-dried food. It's kind of an intermediate step. These foods can be rehydrated to whatever consistency you prefer, so you can add a little bit of water. It'll become kind of like a saturated bit of cereal, and so for some cats this can be a better alternative than just moistening their dry food. It also improves the nutrient distribution of their diet, and it can be a good step towards a wet diet. Just start adding more and more water, and eventually your cat can be on that good high moisture diet. And so for those of you who are in that position, I would recommend Stella and Chewy's freeze-dried cat food. In this case, I'm going to be recommending their chicken recipe, but they have a wide variety of other recipes with a variety of protein sources. They have a lot of options for cats with food sensitivities, single protein recipes, so lots to choose from, and all of them are nutritionally excellent. This particular recipe contains chicken with bone, chicken gizzards, chicken liver, and then some pumpkin for added fiber. And according to our lab test, everything checks out. It looks like a nutritionally solid food without a lot of issues going on in terms of microbes or heavy metals. We found that it was 58% protein, 27% fat, and 3% carbohydrates on a dry matter basis. So again, it's looking nutritionally about exactly where you want a cat food to be. So overall, it's looking quite good. So this food is about $36.32 per pound. So again, pretty expensive, but then again, it's significantly lighter, less dense than the other foods listed here. So you can feed your cat less by weight each day. So by my estimates, it's probably going to cost somewhere between $3 and maybe $5 a day, depending on which recipe you choose. So it's definitely more expensive than a typical dry food, but maybe not quite as expensive as you would assume looking at the price of the bags. So that's it for my recommendations. You can get more in-depth analyses of these recipes as well as access to all of those lab reports, so you can look closely at each of those analytes in the article linked in the description. And I'll also link a couple more resources so you can learn more about our overall best recommendations for cat food in general, as well as recommendations for the best wet cat food. I hope that you found this roundup helpful and that it gave you a better idea of some of the best foods you can buy for your cat in 2022. If you would like to see more roundups like this one, as well as in-depth reviews of specific cat food brands and reviews of many other products, please go ahead and subscribe to the All About Cats channel. We put out new videos at least once a week, so there's always something to look forward to, whether you're interested in product reviews or veterinary information. We always have something new on the way. So thank you so much, and I hope to see you next week. Bye.